The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Baseball season is right around the corner, and the 1420 Sports Bar Podcast and SeatGeek are on a 30-day tour with fans from around the major leagues. Listen in as we talk about where to get a bite or a beverage pre- and post-game, best places to sit at every ballpark, favorite food, favorite players, and favorite moments from all 30 stadiums from around the big leagues. It's the 1420 Fan Experience Ballpark Tour, brought to you by SeatGeek. Let's get into it. The 1420 Major League Baseball Fan Experience Ballpark Tour brought to you by SeatGeek and the SeatGeek app. Use promo code 1420pod at SeatGeek.com today and save yourself $20 at SeatGeek on your first purchase. Next up on the baseball tour is Citi Field in Queens, New York, home of the New York Mets. Today I am joined by Brian Scott, host of the Injured List podcast, part of the Belly Up network of shows. How are you doing today, Brian?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good, sir. Thanks for doing this, by the way, on a Saturday morning. You're a busy guy and you got lots going on, but you fit us into our schedule. That's awfully kind of you.
My pleasure. I don't mind jumping in every once in a while for doing a little off-topic conversation from my
There you go. Oh, it's a good thing. I've been to New York a number of times. I'm a Yankee guy, as you can see, with all the crap behind me here. But I've flown into LaGuardia, and I've seen Citi Field, obviously. There's not much, like, I'm not going to be a Met hater, this whole thing. I'm not going to do that, but there seems to be not a whole bunch to do around Citi Field. Am I wrong in that assumption?
You're not wrong, but that is changing, and it's changing very quickly. In fact, there's a lot of construction going on over there right now beyond the right field wall, which is where there used to be a lot of car chop shops. There was probably a few legitimate businesses, but the majority of them were not. And the city came in a few years ago and was basically like, we're shutting you guys down. So you have a couple of options where we'll pay to buy you out of your facility and we'll relocate you, or we'll have to do an eminent domain and take you over. So once they did that, about 80 to 90% of the shops took off and disappeared. There was a few stragglers, but from what I saw last time I was back in New York, and from what I've heard from friends and family, is they've already started demolishing and building stuff over there. So the plan originally, from what I heard and read in city papers, was that they're going to actually be developing a kind of an outdoor entertainment area, similar to like what you would find in certain areas of cities around the country, like in Tampa, where they have that big outdoor area down in Tampa. Some other cities probably have it. I think Philly developed something similar around the ballpark and the football field down in Philly. But the plan is to try and build a big outdoor event space venue where people can go eat, dine, shop, possibly. I'm not sure. But it looks like it's happening. It's moving. But I'm sure with anything that happens in New York City, it's going to be a lot of hiccups along the way, some setbacks, delays. So it'll probably be a while before we actually see anything fruitful coming out of there. But yeah, you're right. There's not a lot to do in that immediate area, but it's a short subway ride from Manhattan and into Flushing, Queens too, where there's a lot of stuff going on. So in either direction, you can find plenty of stuff going on.
What's the I know you go to Yankee Stadium, there's the different bars and stuff, and they're old and grungy and dirty and stuff, but it's fun. But what's the pregame experience like for a Mets fan? Like, what do you guys do prior to going into because the gates open like 3 hours before the game time? So what do you guys do prior to game time for maybe a beverage, or do you meet somewhere before you hit the seven line army, whatever it is, whatever you guys call that?
Yeah, well, so the seven line army is like this big group of fans that basically form their own fan club. They're a good time. They usually sit out in center field. They're awesome. But they I gotta be honest, the biggest thing that I've always done, and a lot of my friends who are big Mets fans have always done, is tailgate. There's some really awesome tailgates that go down. I've seen tailgates with several hundred people, with a DJ, full out barbecue pit, full out fire pit, full out barbecue station. I mean, the whole nine. Catered food, homemade food. People just get together, have a good time. There's a couple of different locations where you can find some really good tailgating. Some people will even charge a couple bucks if you want to jump in there and grab a bite to eat. But I got to be honest, man, New York fans are great. A lot of times they see that you're new to the area or your first time game, they'll probably just invite you and give you some free food without even asking for anything in return. So I would recommend that. If you know somebody or if you're going to be attending the game with a local tailgate, it's a great time. There's a couple of different locations down the left field line. There's a bridge that kind of goes over one of the roadways down there near the marina. It's a big popular spot where people will congregate. There's another area on the other side of the train tracks down toward the tennis center where people will also tailgate a lot. It's a big open area. So it's a little bit of a hike to the stadium, but the parking's free. And if you get there early enough, you can set up shop and have a good time.
The tailgating thing, well, because when you go in, you can save yourself a couple of bucks too, because you go inside the ballpark and beer's all of a sudden 15-20 bucks for
easily.
Like it's ridiculous how but you can get a little bit of a glow on and have a good time prior to, because man, it's crazy.
Now, they did open a bar in the stadium called McFadden's when they first opened Citi Field. The problem with that place is obviously it's expensive, but it gets so packed so quickly. And I think they usually open like 3 hours before game time.
Yeah.
Like finding the seat in there, getting service in there, it's just so difficult. It's not really worth the headache or the expense.
What like there's all kinds of things to do outside the stadium, like monuments to look outside of Citi Field. I did a little bit of research, but obviously New York has a rich baseball history. There's a lot going on there, a lot of great players. What's sort of to see and do outside of the stadium before you venture your way into Citi Field?
Yeah, so the stadium itself that kind of pays homage to the old Brooklyn Dodgers stadium, Ebbets Field. So the outside facade is kind of mimicking that look, but all along the stadium on the outside too, they have some bricks where a lot of people purchased and left messages to family or put their names on the bricks. But there's also tiles and etched artwork and things that point to some of the historical and memorable moments in Mets history that kind of basically line the walkway around the stadium. So if you make your way from the right field sign or left field side all the way around, as you go, you'll see different blocks, tiles, or whatever you want to call them. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they're engravings, they're carvings on the stone, and they're depicting different moments in Mets history. Obviously, like one of the iconic ones was like Mike Piazza's home run following September 11th. That's depicted in one of the squares, and then there's all kinds of other ones too. So it's kind of cool. Then once you get inside the stadium, there's actually a lot of cool stuff inside the stadium. In the rotunda there, paying homage to Jackie Robinson and a bunch of other historical things along with the Mets organization and baseball in general. So
yeah, last summer when we kind of along the same lines in New York, obviously at Madison Square Garden, I've been there a few times, but then this past summer when we went to Billy Joel concert, of course, right, that's what people do. All the way around had a year by year pictures. I never realized before. You walk all the way around and you go, oh, and I never picked up on it before. And it's great how New York can do that with their rich sports history. And well, they've been around forever, right? So it's one of those things. Yeah. What's the best? Like, once you get inside, and there's I'm assuming they have a Hall of Fame there, or their museum probably. Have you been in there?
Yes, they have a Mets Hall of Fame, Mets museum there. To be honest, I don't think I've ever actually been there. I don't think it's as sacred as the Monument Park in Yankee Stadium, obviously, because of the championship numbers. But they do have, I think, their own little mini Mets Hall of Fame in the stadium somewhere. But there's a lot of cool little things going on throughout the park. The nice thing about the inside of that Citi Field is when you walk into the field level, you can access the entire stadium from that level, and you can walk 360 degrees around the park hassle-free. You don't need a ticket stub. So once you're in that level, you can basically go around. There's food everywhere. They've got a brewery type area out in the center field behind the seats. They've got they usually have like some things for kids back there. There's a little mini field in the back where they have activities for children. They usually have like a pitching radar thing. All kinds of events depending on the game and who's in town. But
it seems to me like a lot of baseball parks are going to that, like the newer ones, and then there people are remodeling everything. It seems to me like a lot of these places are getting more reason for people to not be in their seats than for people to be in their seats, because then when they're out of their seats, they're spending more money and the like. And it seems to be that the way everything's flowing. Get off what you mentioned Monument Park. I might get shot by other Yankee fans for saying this. that is the most overrated thing. It's just a bunch of
Oh, really?
it's just a bunch of plaques. It's people line up for hours to go. Oh, okay, it's there. Like it's
Yeah.
overrated. Personally, that's my own opinion. But anyway, go and have a beer or something instead. Don't stand in line. But that's
Yeah.
my opinion. You get in. You get your like. What's the best? The best you talked about the brewery out in center field and they got going on there. What's the best beverages and food options you got in Citi Field?
So I mean, there's a ton of stuff. In fact, I think they've actually hired one of the former winners of one of the cooking shows that's on TV these days as one of the chefs for one of the restaurants. I can't remember the name, but they've got a lot of good like local New York City eateries that have some places there. Jacob's Pickles is one place which is awesome. My wife and I used to go there in Manhattan all the time, and they actually have a venue now in Citi Field where they do like amazing fried chicken, believe it or not, biscuit sandwiches, and these fried pickles, which are freaking phenomenal. There's also I gotta get the best bang for your buck has always been the sausage and peppers.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal there. I don't even know if it's made by anybody famous or any famous restaurant in New York City, but the sausage and peppers is always the best bang for your dollar at Citi Field. But they've also got Patsy's Pizzeria, which is a famous pizzeria that's been in New York since like the 1930s. They've got a place there, and then of course Shake Shack, which is a very popular burger joint that was started in New York City. It's now kind of throughout the country, but they have an eatery there as well, and they usually have themed burgers after players on the team. I think now they got like an Alonzo burger or something like that, but they always, throughout the years, different players have had different items named after them on the menu. Those are probably the more popular ones, but there's a bunch of other ones. I mean, they've got basically any cuisine you can think of. There's a couple of sushi restaurants in there. They've got a bunch of Mexican cuisine and South American cuisine there. One of the sushi restaurants is like a branch off of one of the famous Japanese restaurants in New York City as well. Mamuku, I think, is the name or something like that. But they sell serve sushi and Asian cuisine. So I mean, you can pretty much get anything you want. But if if you're not looking to drop a lot of money at the park, like I said, it's a quick train ride into Manhattan, quick train ride out to Flushing, Queens, where you can get authentic, top of the line Asian cuisine, or you can head into the city and find anything you want to. So
That was the one thing when I first went to New York. I didn't know anything about it. This is in 2012 or 13. I didn't know anything about New York City at all, and I was a bit overwhelmed and everything. So I ended up staying in the Bronx of all places. And I didn't think. And yeah, that was the one time I did that. Was that some Days Inn or something just down the road, so it wasn't too bad. But oh boy! And then the ease of the subway system in New York, it's really really simple. Like you just jump on the D train in Manhattan and you're at Yankee Stadium in 30 minutes, so it's not a big deal, right? So it's pretty easy to navigate all that stuff. Where like when you go to a game at Citi, do you have a certain spot you like to sit when you and your wife go, or do you mix it up a little bit? Because I have my at Yankee Stadium, I have my place where I like to sit, and we sit there all the time in the same vicinity. What's your go-to spot once you're at a game?
Um, Honestly, I sat pretty much everywhere over there. And there's really not. And I say this honestly, there's really not a bad seat in the house. I mean, I sat in the Pepsi porch, which is probably one of the more higher points up, but it's a cool view, especially when guys are hitting home runs out to that part of the ballpark. You feel like it's always going to land in your lap. It often doesn't make it up there, but and they've got a bunch of cool stuff going on back there too. There's all kinds of things throughout the stadium. So even if you're sitting up high up, there's always things going on behind the bleachers and where a lot of the concessions are. But I've sat down low along the third baseline. I've sat in left field, just above the wall. And I swear when I say there's not a bad seat in that place, man. Every seat's great view. You will feel like you're really close. Now, don't forget, I'm comparing a lot of this to Shea Stadium because I grew up going to Shea Stadium, and it is night and day from Shea Stadium. Shea Stadium, the seats were like at a pitch. I mean, you couldn't like.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Felt like you were hiking up a side of a mountain cliff to try and get into your seats. The stairs were narrow. I mean, it was dangerous walking up and down those seats, especially in the upper deck. They had box seats down low on field level, which literally were a box. There was metal piping that would segregate.
I always remember. Like I remember that watching on TV. Like how the hell do you even get into those things? It like from your watching on TV. Like how do people even get into there? Like it didn't make any sense to me because I was 10 years old.
It was brutal, and it was very uncomfortable. The seats were not big; they were not spaced out. Well, I mean, that stadium was built in the '60s, and they hadn't done much as far as renovations go, so it was pretty original to that time frame. So and then you couldn't really get to many other parts of the stadium when it was in Shea without your ticket stub. They wouldn't really let you down by field level unless you had a field level seat ticket. So sometimes we'd throw the ushers a couple of bucks as when we were kids if they let us down there before the game started. So, but Citi Field is complete opposite of that. So, I don't really have a preferential place to sit. I did go to the World Series game. I think it was game 3 or 4 when they played the Royals back in, I think, was it 2016, 2015?
15, I think it was, or 14.
It was
14.
the game where they lost and Daniel Murphy misplayed that ground ball late in the game that basically ended up costing them or losing the game. But and I sat down along the left field third baseline, not too far up. I was actually at really good seats. My wife was gracious enough to buy it as a gift for me because she knew this might never happen again in our lifetime. And so I went with a friend, and it was an amazing experience. But there's not a bad seat in that place. So I don't have any preferential place to sit. But getting back to getting to and from the stadium, they make it really easy. The 7 train, which comes from Grand Central over to Flushing, which is the last stop, on weeknights and weekends during game times, they have a Super Express, which basically bypasses a ton of stops and gets to the stadium from Manhattan in like 3 stops.
Yeah.
So it's super fast. It's always packed with Mets fans going to the game. And it's much easier than taking a local. The local will take you like over an hour. But you get on that Super Express, you're there like within 15, 20 minutes. And the same thing the other direction. Plus, you have the Long Island Railroad, which comes in to Willets Point, and it's a short walk right over to Citi Field as well. So there's no reason to ever drive to the stadium if you don't feel like it or have to. The trains are geared and scheduled around game time. So it's really easy as far as public transportation goes to get in and out. That's usually the way I go, believe it or not. And I lived in Bayside, which is like the next town over. I literally lived like 4 or 5 miles from the stadium. So, and I would take the 7 train in.
It's funny how people always get confused. Well, which way do you go? Just follow all the jerseys. You'll get there.
Yeah, that's all you got to do.
It's really quite simple. Follow all the jerseys, and there'll be all of a sudden there'll be more and more and more of the jerseys, and then you're just there.
See them all at the stops.
You're automatically there. It's quite easy.
Yeah.
And then if you're on the wrong side of the subway, to get on, you'll know which one to get on because all the other jerseys are over there. It's really quite simple. The Mets have had a long, illustrious history. Like it's not a lot of heartache going on there. Not the one World Championship, or not in our lifetime. They got 2 overall. Who's your favorite Met of all time?
I've got so many.
We got time.
I really used to I loved Jose Reyes when he came up with them. He was such a dynamic player. He could do it all. 5-tool player, hit for power. The guy can run like lights out. I just felt like the timing was just a little off. They didn't quite have the pitching when he came up with David Wright. How could you not love Keith Hernandez when he was on the Mets and Strawberry and those guys?
Oh, man.
I mean, phenomenal. I was always a big fan of Sid Fernandez, the big lefty back in the 80s growing up. Mookie Wilson. I mean, obviously because they won the championship, they're probably a little bit more stuck in my head. But, the Mets had a lot of really good players came through their system. Unfortunately, it never, ever really clicked together, or the timing never quite worked out where they could have a ton of guys on the same field at the same time to kind of take them to that championship level. But it's looking good the last few years. It's looking good for the future. Unfortunately, we lost Jacob deGrom to free agency this past year, but they were able to bring in a couple of veterans, and they've got some young talent still in the wings here. So hopefully we can get stuff done. But, I mean, how could you not love Jacob deGrom? I mean, the guy was a Mets farm system guy, came up as a shortstop, wasn't even supposed to be a pitcher, came onto the scene, and right from day one, it was like, okay, looks like we got something special here. and he did not disappoint either. So
Yeah, DeGrom, that's an interesting subject because to me, I think he would have taken less money. I think he just wanted out of New York. Like he was leaving no matter what. Like it was, I'm going and I don't care. Like it just for whatever reason, it just seems that way to me that he was like, we're close and winning's not really a priority to me. And to say winning's a priority and you end up with the Texas Rangers is kind of a okay, because the Mets have a shot. They have a really good shot this year. That must be refreshing having an owner there that's. And I don't besmirch a guy who wants to spend money and goes to do it. 'Cause I think that's better for baseball than the other side of baseball, where you got a lot of owners who aren't spending money and just filling their pockets. Having an owner like that must be a good feeling.
yeah, Cohen comes in, I think, with that New York mentality. Like, we want to be at the top. Like, let's get it done. And I'm willing to, spare no expense to make that happen if that's what it takes on my end. And then, throwing it back on the players and say, I got you what you needed. Let's make it happen. So I feel like the team has that kind of mentality. A lot of the young players that have been there for a while. I mean, you look at guys like Alonso and what's his name? Even their center fielder that they just re-signed. He's been with the Mets his entire career. Brandon Nimmo,
Yeah.
and a bunch of other guys. So they're all buying in. It sounds like. Hopefully, this will be the year. We'll have to see, but yeah, it's. I mean, it's. I have nothing good to say about the Wilpons and what they did to that franchise for many
what
years.
a disaster that
So I
turned
won't
out to
even
be.
go there. But they were in bed with Bernie Madoff. If that tells you anything, then that's all you really need to know.
That whole thing is just a debacle. Like, and everybody laughs every year on July the 1st. The Bobby Bonilla $1.1 million he gets until 2035, like 35 or 36.
Yeah, it's ridiculous amount of years. Yeah.
That is absolutely insane how that all worked out. And it's the old Mets are gonna Met situation, right? It's one of those, and it's crazy how that all turned out to be, and it's crazy. With my thing with the Mets is that they're going for it year in year out, and they have a couple of older pitchers this year, obviously with Verlander and Scherzer, and they went and picked up David Robertson, great Yankee reliever, and then went free agent to Chicago, but now he's back with the Mets. Like, it doesn't seem to bother the ownership groups. He's got $14 actual billion in the bank, not the paper trail money. So they're going for it, and if Scherzer and Verlander get a little bit older, which they are, and they're out next year, they'll go and get two more guys and throw $40 million each, and it's like, let's go for it. If we're gonna do it, let's do it.
Actually, what I'm most excited about as far as their signings go this offseason is this guy out of Japan, Kodai Sengai, whatever. This dude, I think is going to be legit, and I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. He's got some nasty stuff. He's young. He shows some great promise over in Japan, which I know is not quite what MLB is, but we've seen some great players coming out of Japan in the last few years and historically. So I'm excited to see what he's going to bring to the table, and I think signing him was one of the reasons why they were a little bit less worried about letting Jacob deGrom go. I don't think Scherzer and Verlander necessarily were the big reason they let deGrom go. I think it was because of this guy, because this guy's got some wicked stuff. He's young, and I think the sky is the limit for him. If he can take what Verlander and Scherzer can teach him under his wing, sky's the limit.
I have a prediction what's going to happen with the Mets a little bit. I think that once the Angels are out of it, which is basically tomorrow when spring training games start, they're going to start thinking, well, because they got Ohtani this year for $30 million, whatever it is. I think that Ohtani ends, because they're not going to be able to sign him long term, because they're not going to win. They're not, and they're going to end up. Ohtani's going to end up with the Mets this season. They're not going to win the World Series this year, but at the end of the year, Machado, because San Diego's not going to win, Machado, he's opting out, he said. He also ends up with the Mets. And in 2024, the New York Metropolitans are going to win the World Series. Mark that one down.
I'll tell you what, if we can land Ohtani, I think that alone might propel us.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if you need Machado and all the baggage he brings. But, I mean, you bring Ohtani over here in Queens, of all places. Oh, he'd love it. He'd love New York. That's why I'm excited that this young Japanese pitcher that they got is here, because, traditionally a lot of the Japanese players prefer to stay out west in California or the West Coast because of the Asian community out there. But
you look at Ichiro was out in Seattle forever. It's the same thing, right?
I mean, New York, especially Flushing, which is the right. I mean, you can see Flushing from the stadium.
Yeah.
That's like the one of the biggest Asian communities outside of Asia, anywhere in the country. Flushing, Queens is predominantly Asian. Any Asian player coming over from Japan, I'm telling you, they would love New York City, especially playing in Queens.
Yeah, stay like I can't like staying playing out in the Bronx. I don't recommend that for just it's a different breed out there. They're weird. I went
No
to actually
disrespect. No disrespect. No
yeah,
disrespect.
no disrespect, but it's a different part of the world. There's no getting around that. Actually, last summer we went to a Subway Series game with in the Bronx, and it was fantastic. Like I thought, like the Mets fans and the Yankee fans got along quite well. It wasn't
Great.
it wasn't rambunctious like you hear all the horror stories and all. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was some fun. There was some like ribbing, and it was nothing mean, nothing aggressive.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. Do you find
Great
Mets fans
camaraderie. That's what it is.
like? Do you find Mets fans to be that way? Because there's some place you go and oh, here we go. Like just it's awful. Like there are some pretty aggressive places. What are Mets fans like in general?
I mean, they're not much different than your Yankee fans. I mean, you got to have thick skin if you're coming in there as a visitor wearing an opponent jersey. You're gonna get razzled, but for the most part, everyone does it in good spirits, in good fun. It's still a really good family fun atmosphere there. Of course, you're gonna get your bad dolls every once in a while there, but it's great. The Subway Series, man, all across New York, because don't forget we got Giants, Jets, we got Mets, Yanks. You've got Rangers, Islanders.
Yeah.
You've got NYFC now, and
Knicks, Nets,
and the Red Bulls. You got Knicks, Nets. I mean, it's ridiculous. So we're used to it as fans going against our rival in inner city teams. So most people take it as an opportunity to go to games with their friends who they know dislike their team, but like the other team and vice versa. So it usually becomes this whole camaraderie thing. You see a lot of people traveling in packs together where there's Mets fans on one side, and Yankee fans on the other side, and they came together in the same car. So, and that's just the way it is when you walk into the stadium. You see people sitting next to each other who are there together to root on for their individual teams. You see husband and wives wearing different jerseys. You see boyfriends, girlfriends wearing different jerseys. It's a lot of fun. I've never had a bad experience with any type of rambunctious or mean spirited thing there. I've always had a great time.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was my first experience in Subway Series. I loved it. Just the constant jabbing back and forth. We were sitting out in 203 with the bleacher creatures that night, and it was a lot of fun. we had a really fun time. And the only time I've ever had a problem actually at a Yankee game was actually when I was in New York and the Jays were in town, and I'm Canadian, and so I was talking and I was wearing all my Yankee garb, and this guy got talking to him. He was from Toronto, and he started giving me grief about being and I thought I was going to get punched. I'm like, usually Canadians are supposed to be the nice ones, right? I was like, what's going on here? Like, how can you call yourself a Canadian? Well, because I am Canadian, man. Like it was just.
I'm sure the Bronx people picked up on that Canadian accent right away.
Yes, it's like that's exactly it. That's funny. It's just funny that you get in trouble like that. Give me your prediction of where the New York Metropolitans, because you had a heartbreaking playoff loss last year in the wild card round to San Diego, like we just mentioned. 106 wins last year, I think it was. What's your prediction for the upcoming season? And what are your hopes and dreams? Is it the first World Series coming back since '86?
I hope so. I mean, that would definitely be a hope and a dream. I'm not sure how realistic it is, just given the turnover, but and the pitching staff primarily. But if our young players like Alonso and Nimmo and I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry, it's been a long week. Our shortstop. Help me out here.
Yeah, I know. I can't think for some reason. I can't think of it either. It doesn't much matter.
You know what I'm talking about.
They gave him $1 billion, but yeah.
Yes. If they can have a year like they did last year, and if the pitching staff can stay healthy and stay consistent, I think consistency has always been the issue with the Mets, especially their pitching staff. They always have this kind of second half season dip. Last year they actually didn't. If they can keep that up, I think now that they got another year under their belt, now that they got some of that playoff experience under their belt with their young guys, I don't know if they're going to necessarily top that 106 win number, but they don't need to. They just got to stay, within the 90s win column and stay ahead of the Braves, because the Braves, for whatever reason, always seem to just end up at the top of the pile there. I don't know how they do it year after year after year, but they do. And if the Mets can just keep them back there in the lineup in the standings and do their thing, then I think they can do it. I think they can at least solidify the division title so they don't have to play the wild card game and can actually make it into the series. That would be ideal. Not just one and done.
That's such a tough division. You like every always talks about the American League East, but the NL East, you got the Phillies, obviously, you got the Braves and you got the Mets. That's a tough go. Like it's a really tough. Yeah, you have your weak sisters with the Washington Nationals and everything because they're going to lose 120 games this year probably. But those are games you got to win though. That's the thing. Like those are more pressure filled, I think, than beating the Braves because you'll go 10-9 against the Braves or 9-10 or whatever it's going to be. But when you have someone in your division that isn't going to win a lot of games, those are the games that can make or break your season when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
Let's get
the division should be good this year.
Yeah, it's good. Well, you had a World Series finalist last year in the Phillies came out of nowhere, right? And as a Mets fan, is there a team that you can't take? And don't say the Yankees, but is there a team in the division that you just like? I can't stand the team, the fan base. Is there one team that you just I don't like these guys?
I don't have a problem with any of the fan bases, but I just can't stand the Braves because I just don't understand how they continually do it year after year after year. I just don't understand.
Yeah.
And they always seem to have a really good player. They ship them off. And then somehow in the pipeline of their farm system, they find some other guy that just comes in and right from the start is like MVP, World Series caliber, all-star player. And nobody's ever heard of. And they
never rebuild. They just regroup, it seems. Every year in, year out.
It's like they just have a revolving door of young talent coming through their farm system that they never seem to trade away. Somehow they acquire them. I don't know if it's through the draft or what. We never hear about them until they end up in the big leagues, and then they're like superstar, all-star caliber player, franchise player. And I don't know how they do it, but they do. And I don't know if that goes to their upper management. But you talk about model of consistency. I mean, they've been through like 2 coaches in the last like 30 years. Yeah. They've won like 16 league titles in the division titles in the last 20 years. I mean, like it's just year after year after year. And I can remember, when I was younger, where the Braves were so irrelevant, it wasn't even funny.
Yeah.
But then as I got a little older and they became relevant, they've never not been relevant now. It's like, yeah, it's unbelievable. So they're probably the biggest tick under my skin when it comes to franchises, just because they're playing our division. We play them so many times a year. We always seem to play them at the end of the year when it matters most, and they always seem to be just ahead of us enough that we can't pull it out.
Yeah, there was that one series last year where if the Mets would have just won one game out of 4, I think it was, down in Atlanta, and they lost all 4, and so there was a season right there. Like it changed everything. Like there's an old saying, you can't win the World Series in April, but you can sure lose it. And losing those games early can really affect your season. When people say, well, it doesn't matter, it's April. Yeah, but at the end of the 162, it matters. Francisco Lindor was the guy. Yes. There it just came to my head for some reason. I don't know why. It's just one of those things.
I don't know why I blanked on his name too, but
that's funny. We'll do some extra innings. We'll get you out of here. You got a busy day ahead of you. So ready to go?
Oh yeah.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No.
Huh.
No, it's a hot dog. It stands alone in its own category.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. Just a question. Day game or night game? What's your preference?
Oh, where? It depends where.
Okay. At Citi.
Oh, I love the day games at Citi. It's actually really cool. But you can't go wrong with the night game there either. But if I'm like in LA, Dodger Stadium, I want to be there in a day. I want to see that panoramic kind of view in the back.
It's fantastic. Yeah. I love it. Yeah.
If I'm at Wrigley, I want a day game at Wrigley. Because that's what Wrigley's known for, right? They never had the lights there until like 1995. So
yeah, it was crazy.
If I want to go to a game at Wrigley, I'm going today.
Yeah, Wrigley's a great spot. It's cold though, man. I went in in April one year, and oh man, the wind, it was brutal. Here's another one. How old is too old to bring your ball glove to a game for a foul ball or a home run?
There's no limit. It's timeless. You can do it anytime you want, whenever you want, however old you are.
That's the right answer.
Yeah.
Deep down inside, do you hate Yankee fans?
Fans, no. The organization, a little bit.
There you go. I think that's the right answer. That's the right answer. You shouldn't just hate someone because they wear the color of their hat, right? That's kind of one of those things. We should all try to get along and make things a little bit easier. Hey, Brian, thanks for doing this a lot. Tell us about your podcast, what you got going on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. First off, it was a lot of fun. It's a little off topic for me. I usually cover sports injuries, and that's my gig. It's what I do for a living, so that's why I do it. And I have my own podcast, as you mentioned earlier, called the Injured List Podcast, part of the Belly Up Fantasy Network. Primarily, it's where I do a lot of my work. Now getting set to do a big NFL offseason injury update next week on March 2nd with Dan Mater on MD's Fantasy Football Show. We'll be doing that live on YouTube. You guys can tune in and ask questions. You can find me on the Belly Up Network website. You can find me at my own website, theinjuredlist.com. And you can find me wherever you listen to your podcasts, any of the major podcast platforms.
There, you click a button here and there, and they all always pop up somehow, some way. I don't even know half the time how they get placed. Whatever, it's here, it's there, whatever. How it always works. No, it's that NFL situation. My co-host that we'll talk get off baseball for half a second here, but he's a big Denver Broncos fan. That Russell Wilson situation that they got going on there, and how he ended up basically running the franchise and wanted to. I don't know if you read anything about it, about him going up to the Seahawks brass saying get rid of Pete Carroll, and like that whole Russell Wilson situation is an odd one to me. He seemed like such a good guy when he was in Seattle, and it turns out he's really not.
Is it me, or is the NFL starting to turn into like the NBA a little bit?
Yeah,
I feel like they're starting to get a little bit up in their britches a little bit more than they probably should, these players. And I understand, like, it's a physical game. They need to watch out for themselves. They got to make their money. But it's starting to have that feel where the players are kind of dictating everything that's happening all of a sudden. And I think there needs to be a little bit more kind of working in cohesion here with the organizations and the players. But yeah, it's weird stuff. I don't think we've seen the end of that. Denver, you couldn't have had a worse season.
Oh,
Russell Wilson going to Denver first year. So we'll have to see what happens there. But man, that was not good.
Yeah, like you said, when the inmates start running the asylum, no matter what business you got, you hate to say it with these athletes because they're world class and they're the elite of the elite, but they're at the end of the day they're just employees, right? And
correct,
they're replaceable. It's a terrible thing to say because we like watching sports so much, but it just seems to be going on more and more and more in all sports. And there's a lot, like hockey up here. There's a lot of problems with some teams that there's players are starting to just quit on their teams and no one cares. It's just the money gets involved too much, I think, is what happens, right? And we're living in a day and age where everybody got participation trophies and everybody was winning all the time, and now they were never told no. I think that's part of the problem. So.
Well, and that's part of the problem too. I mean, I follow the Rangers in hockey, and you got this whole situation with their number 9 pick from a few years ago, Kravtsov. The guy just feels entitled right out of the gate, and he hasn't done anything to prove himself NHL ready. And now here he is demanding a trade. So I'm glad because I like to see him shipped off.
Bye.
We've got plenty of young talent currently on the roster and in the pipeline as well, so we don't need them. Hopefully they'll get something good in return at least. But yeah, that's a classic example of what we see today. And it's happening in every sport. But
every sport, yeah, it's nuts. I still think that Kane's going to end up with some way.
It sounds like it.
They'll make that work. I mean, by the time this gets out, it'll probably already happen. So anyways.
Yeah, Drury's proven to be a pretty good negotiator, pretty good dealer, wheeler and dealer here. So anything will be better than what we got with him right now. It's just a matter of hopefully not giving up too much.
Well, that's just it. Like I will get out of here in half a second. I always find it odd how athletes end up being in management at the end of it because they were just hockey players, and especially it happens in hockey more than any of the other sports. I think that they're hockey players, and then the next day they're the GM, and it's like, well, how the heck did that happen? Like it's odd how that works out.
Yeah. By the way, Brent, let your viewers know I don't just do football. That's what I do primarily, but I do everything. So if you ever want to have me back to talk hockey, I'll be happy to talk hockey. The problem with hockey is they don't tell you what the injuries are, which drives me nuts.
Upper body, lower body, that's it.
Like, what is that? I don't know when that started, but it's only been the last few years. And it makes my job a hell of a lot more difficult, which is already difficult enough because I'm just going off the media reports and everything. But if all they tell you is a lower body injury and that's it, I've got nothing.
Lower body injury. Okay. Yeah, that's got to be, it has to be something to do with, and I think it's going to get worse in most sports where the sports betting is taking over, and that's going to make that whole thing a bit weird, like what the actual injury is and how long guys are going to be out.
Yeah, but it must have been an agreement they came to with the Players Association or something, because we don't see that in any other sport.
No.
But when it comes to gambling, that's huge. That's like a huge bit of information to know. because that could swing the odds tremendously depending on who the player is and how long they're going to be out. I mean, I don't know why
if
they
you had an
over
under win total for the season, and all of a sudden this guy's out for you think might be 2 games, all of a sudden it's 2 months. That can change a lot of things up. And so,
could you imagine in the NFL if when Tua had a concussion, they just said upper body injury, and that was it?
Yeah.
And nobody knew how long he was going to be out or what he was out
Waist up
for.
now. Like, you guys figured it out on your own.
Yeah, like that's crazy. I don't know. I hope I don't know when that happened. I don't know what caused that to happen, but it makes my job reporting on NHL stuff really tough. So I haven't done much NHL, but I'm always happy to talk NHL or any sport for that matter. So
well, we'll have you back on the show once the playoffs start. Maybe we'll get talking some hockey, but and then maybe we'll do something before the because mine or the spring training games start today. So that's a lot of fun. We'll get this going. We'll have you back on the show for sure. Thanks a lot, Brian. Thanks a lot for doing this. We'll be sure to promote the heck out of your show and see where this can all go. This crazy belly up network thing we got going on.
All right, Brent. Thanks. I'm glad to do it.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Have a good one.